Captain Lisa Summers stood tall on the bridge of the UES Intrepid, her gaze fixed on the massive alien vessel that dwarfed her ship. After decades of searching the stars, humanity had finally made contact with an advanced alien civilization. The Zirionian Collective, as they called themselves, had responded to Earth signals with surprising speed. "Captain, they're requesting permission to dock," said Communications Officer Peter Clark, his voice betraying a mix of excitement and fear. Lisa nodded. "Grant permission and notify the Welcome Committee. This is what we've trained for." Staff. Sergeant Daniel Jackson adjusted his dress uniform in the mirror of his quarters. At 35, his face showed the weathered look of someone who had seen too much combat during the water wars back home. He wasn't sure why the brass had selected a Marine for this diplomatic mission, but orders were orders. "Sergeant Jackson." To the main airlock came the announcement over the ship's speakers. "First contact procedures are in effect." The airlock doors opened with a soft hiss, revealing creatures that looked somewhat like tall, slender humanoids with grayish-blue skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. The delegation of 5 Zironians towered over the humans by at least a foot. "Welcome aboard the UES Intrepid," Lisa said, stepping forward with her hand extended in the universal gesture of peace. "I am Captain Lisa Summers of the United Earth Alliance." The tallest Zirionian looked down at her hand with what appeared to be amusement before mimicking the gesture awkwardly. "I am Admiral Krelvac of the Zirionian Collective. We have monitored your species for some time now. Your signals reached our outer territories 3 of your Earth years ago." Daniel stood at attention behind the captain, observing the aliens carefully. Something about their body language reminded him of senior officers evaluating new recruits, a mixture of curiosity and dismissal. The initial meeting went smoothly enough, with basic information exchanged about both civilizations. The Zironians revealed they were part of a federation of 7 different species that had dominated their region of the galaxy for thousands of years. "Please, join us aboard our vessel for what you would call a diplomatic reception," Admiral Krelvac said as the meeting concluded. "We wish to show you proper Zirionian hospitality." 6 hours later, Daniel found himself standing uncomfortably in a vast chamber aboard the Zirionian flagship. The room was filled with aliens of various ranks, all seemingly curious about the humans. He had been instructed to remain silent unless directly addressed, as this was primarily a diplomatic function. "Your vessels are quite primitive," a Zirionian officer said to Lisa, not bothering to hide his condescension. "Do they even have light-fold capabilities?" "We call it warp drive," Lisa replied evenly. "And yes, the Intrepid can reach speeds of warp 3, which I believe translates to roughly half a light-fold in your measurements." The alien made a trilling sound that the translators didn't catch, but Daniel recognized it as laughter from the way the other aliens responded. "Tell me, Captain Summers," Admiral Krelvac said, joining the conversation, "how many systems has Earth conquered?" Lisa blinked in surprise. "Earth doesn't conquer systems, Admiral. We explore and establish peaceful contact where possible." This time, the laughter was more obvious, with several aliens making the same trilling sound. "A species that doesn't expand will surely perish," said a smaller Zirionian that had been introduced as Sub-Commander Xerix. "How do you acquire resources and territory?" "We trade, negotiate, and when necessary, establish colonies on uninhabited worlds," Lisa explained. The Admiral made a dismissive gesture. "Inefficient. Allow me to show you effective expansion." A large screen descended from the ceiling, displaying what appeared to be military footage. Daniel instantly recognized it as combat recordings. The images showed massive Zirionian warships in orbit around a green-blue planet not unlike Earth. Without warning, the ships released what looked like energy weapons that struck the planet's surface. A camera zoomed in to show cities being reduced to ash, with small dots that could only be people running in panic. "This was our recent pacification of the Tauran system," Admiral Krelvac explained proudly. "They resisted our resource claims for decades. The operation took less than 6 hours from first strike to total surrender." Daniel felt his stomach turn as he watched what was clearly the annihilation of civilian population centers. The human delegation had fallen completely. Silent, their faces showing various degrees of horror. Sub-Commander Xerix noticed their expressions. Is something wrong? This is standard warfare? The quickest path to victory is through total subjugation. Those were civilian cities, Lisa said quietly, non-combatants. The Admiral tilted his head in confusion. Yes, of course. Breaking the civilian will is the fastest way to force governmental surrender. On Earth, we would consider that a war crime, Lisa said, her voice steady despite her obvious discomfort. War ... crime? The Admiral repeated the term as if trying to understand a completely foreign concept. How can warfare have crimes? The purpose of war is to win. Daniel could no longer remain silent. Sir, with respect, targeting civilians deliberately is prohibited under Earth's laws of armed conflict, as are mass killings, torture, and attacking medical facilities. Admiral Krelvac turned all four eyes toward Daniel. You limit your own effectiveness based on arbitrary rules? How strange. No wonder your species has made such little progress in galactic terms. We call it humanity, Daniel replied, forgetting his orders to stay quiet. It's what separates necessary combat from needless slaughter. The room had grown quiet, with all the aliens now focusing on the exchange. Fascinating, said a female Xerionian scientist who had been observing from nearby. Your species has evolved ethical constraints on survival behaviors. Most inefficient, but culturally intriguing. The Admiral waved dismissively. Come, let us show you more of our military achievements. Perhaps you will better understand the benefits of unrestricted warfare. The screen changed to show another planet, this one arid and rocky. The footage showed Xerionian ground troops entering what appeared to be a settlement. They systematically executed everyone they encountered, regardless of whether they were armed. This resistance pocket thought hiding among their young would protect them, Sub-Commander Xerix explained. Casually, we found that eliminating entire bloodlines prevents future insurgencies. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. He caught Lisa's warning glance but couldn't contain himself. That's genocide, he said, his voice cutting through the room. On Earth, the soldiers and commanders responsible would be tried and punished for such actions. The Admiral and his officers stared at Daniel with what appeared to be genuine confusion. Punished? For efficient victory? Admiral Krelvac asked. How does your military function with such limitations? With honor? Daniel replied simply. A young Xerionian officer named Trell approached Daniel while the others continued showing footage. These ... war crimes. You would truly punish your own warriors for these actions, even if they brought victory? Especially. Then, Daniel said quietly, victory without honor isn't worth having. Trell seemed genuinely perplexed. I would like to learn more about these concepts. They are entirely unknown in Xerionia military doctrine. Captain Summers overheard this exchange and stepped closer. Perhaps, Admiral, we could arrange a cultural exchange on this topic. Staff. Sergeant Jackson has extensive knowledge of Earth's military history and ethics. The Admiral considered this for a moment. Yes, this bizarre concept of limiting warfare deserves study. Perhaps there are psychological aspects we have overlooked. In our conquests, he turned to Daniel, you will explain these war crimes to us tomorrow, human warrior. I am curious to understand how a species can survive with such ... restraints. Daniel nodded, already planning how to explain centuries of Earth's bloodiest lessons to a species that found the concept of mercy completely alien. I'll do my best. Sir, he said, knowing that the future relationship between humanity and the Xerionian collective might depend on his ability to make them understand why some victories weren't worth the cost. Daniel couldn't sleep that night. The images of the Xerionian military achievements kept playing in his mind. As a Marine who had fought in the water wars, he had seen his share of combat, but nothing like the casual slaughter the aliens had, displayed with pride. Morning came too quickly, and he found himself in one of the Intrepid's conference rooms, preparing his presentation. Are you ready for this, Sergeant? Captain Summers asked as she entered the room. Daniel nodded. As ready. as I'll ever be, Captain. Though I'm not sure how to explain basic human decency to beings who see genocide as efficient. That's exactly why you were chosen for this mission, Lisa said. Your combat experience combined with your education in military history makes you uniquely qualified. Just remember, this could be the most important lesson you've ever taught. The door slid open and Trell entered, followed by Admiral Krelvak and 5 other Zirionian officers. They took their seats, all 4 eyes on each face, focused intently on Daniel. Begin your explanation of these war crimes, human, the Admiral commanded. Daniel took a deep breath. To understand war crimes, you first need to understand how humans view warfare itself. He activated the room's display system. Computer, show historical file Earth W21939. The screen lit up with black and white footage of World War II, tanks rolling across fields, soldiers in trenches, planes dropping bombs. This was one of our largest global conflicts, Daniel explained. Nations fighting nations across multiple continents. Millions died. An efficient culling, one of the Zirionian officers commented. Daniel shook his head. No, a tragedy that taught us hard lessons. He switched the footage to show concentration camps. Some leaders decided that certain groups of people deserved extermination. They created death camps where millions of civilians were systematically murdered. The aliens watched with what appeared to be mild interest rather than horror. After the war ended, Daniel continued, something unprecedented happened. The victors put the defeated leaders on trial. He showed footage of the Nuremberg trials. They were charged with crimes against humanity and war crimes. Many were executed. Or imprisoned? You punished them for winning efficiently? Admiral Krelvak asked, clearly confused. We punished them for how they fought, not that they fought, Daniel explained. Computer, show Geneva Convention summary. The screen displayed the basic principles of the Geneva Conventions. Daniel walked through each one: the protection of civilians, the humane treatment of prisoners of war, the prohibition of torture, the protection of medical personnel. These rules weren't created by philosophers or politicians, Daniel said. They were created by warriors who had seen the worst of war and wanted something better. Trell leaned forward. But surely these rules limit your tactical options? They do, Daniel agreed. And that's the point. War should have limits. Show us your wars fought under these restrictions, the Admiral demanded. I want to see if they were effective. Daniel nodded. Computer, show combat footage from Operation Desert Storm, 1991. The screen showed precision airstrikes taking out military installations while avoiding civilian areas. It showed soldiers providing medical aid to enemy wounded and processing captured soldiers according to protocol. Notice that even with these restrictions, the coalition forces achieved their objectives in just 100 hours of ground combat, Daniel pointed out. Limiting civilian casualties and treating prisoners humanely actually helped end the conflict faster. But this enemy was weak, another officer argued. Against a stronger foe, surely you would abandon these constraints? Daniel shook his head. The stronger the enemy, the more important these rules become. When both sides follow them, it prevents cycles of revenge and escalation that make wars drag on for generations. He switched to more recent footage from the water wars. This conflict was fought over dwindling freshwater resources as climate change altered Earth's weather patterns. Despite the desperation, most nations still adhered to the laws of armed conflict. The footage showed soldiers establishing humanitarian corridors for civilians to escape combat zones and water distribution centers protected by international symbols. What happens when one side breaks these rules? Trell asked. They face consequences. Daniel replied. Computer, show footage from the International Criminal Court, 2095. The screen displayed the trial of General Alan Reeves, who had ordered the bombing of civilian water treatment facilities during the water wars. This man was one of our own commanders, Daniel explained. When he targeted civilian infrastructure, our own government arrested him and turned him over to the International Court. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Admiral Krelvak made the trilling sound that served as Zirionian laughter. you punish your own successful warriors? This seems counterproductive to military discipline. Actually, it reinforces proper discipline, Daniel countered. A soldier must follow lawful orders, but also has the duty to refuse unlawful ones. It places moral responsibility on each individual warrior, not just commanders. In Zirionian, military doctrine, questioning orders is punishable by death, Sub-Commander Xerix stated flatly. In human military doctrine, following illegal orders can result in the same. Daniel replied. The room fell silent as the aliens processed this information. Finally, Trell spoke up. You mentioned cycles of revenge. Explain this concept. Daniel nodded. When one side commits atrocities, the other side wants revenge. This leads to more atrocities, which leads to more revenge. The cycle continues for generations, making true peace impossible. He displayed images of peace treaties and former enemies now working as allies. By fighting with restraint and treating the defeated with dignity, we make post-war reconciliation possible. Former enemies can become allies. Admiral Krelvak's upper eyes narrowed. In our experience, the only lasting peace comes when enemies are completely subjugated or exterminated. And how many rebellions have you faced in conquered systems? Daniel asked quietly. The Admiral's lower eyes blinked rapidly, a sign Daniel had come to recognize as surprise. Rebellions are ... Taman. We suppress them regularly. Which means you never truly have peace, Daniel pointed out. Just ongoing low-level conflict that drains resources. The Admiral stood abruptly. Your concepts are alien to us, but not without logic. I wish to continue this discussion tomorrow. Bring examples of how these ethical restrictions provide strategic advantages in actual combat situations. After the Zeronians left, Captain Summers approached Daniel. You've given them a lot to think about, Sergeant. I'm not sure if I'm getting through to them, Daniel admitted. Their entire civilization is built on conquest. Asking them to change their fundamental approach to warfare is like asking a shark to become a vegetarian. Lisa smiled slightly. Maybe, but I noticed something interesting. That young officer Trell was taking notes throughout your presentation, and even the Admiral seemed genuinely curious, not just dismissive. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. Tomorrow, I'll focus on the practical benefits of ethical warfare. Maybe if I frame it as a strategic advantage rather than a moral imperative, they'll be more receptive. Good idea, Lisa agreed. In the meantime, I've received word from Earth Command. They're sending additional materials for your presentation, including combat simulations that demonstrate the effectiveness of rules-based engagement. Daniel looked out the viewport at the massive Zerionian vessel alongside the Intrepid. I never thought I'd be teaching aliens about humanity's darkest moments to prevent even darker ones in our future. That's exactly why you're the right person for this job, Lisa said, placing a hand briefly on his shoulder. Get some rest, Sergeant. Tomorrow you continue teaching the most important lesson of your career. As Daniel headed back to his quarters, he couldn't help but wonder if words and historical footage would be enough to change the minds of a species that had built an empire on unrestricted warfare. He would need to find a way to make them understand that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its weapons or technology, but in its capacity for restraint. The next day, Daniel prepared a more practical demonstration. Captain Summers had arranged for a larger meeting room with enough space for what he had planned. When the Zeronians arrived, they found the room rearranged with a central area cleared of furniture. Today we move beyond theory, Daniel announced. Admiral, you asked for examples of how ethical warfare provides strategic advantages. With your permission, I'd like to show rather than tell. Admiral Krelvak made a gesture of approval with his upper limbs. Proceed, human, Daniel pressed his communicator. Send in the demonstration team. 6 Marines entered the room, led by Lieutenant Grace Winters. They carried training weapons and wore standard combat gear. These are members of the Intrepid's Marine Detachment, Daniel explained. With your permission, we'll run 2 combat simulations to demonstrate different approaches to warfare. The Admiral nodded, his 4 eyes focused intently on the Marines. First scenario, Daniel said. A hostile force has taken control of a village and is using it as a base. There are both combatants and civilians present. Lieutenant Winters, please. Demonstrate the unrestricted approach. Grace nodded and turned to her team. Unrestricted warfare protocol. Objectives: eliminate enemy presence by any means necessary. The Marines used the room's holographic system to create a simple village layout. Then they moved through it with brutal efficiency, shooting every holographic figure they encountered, regardless of whether they appeared to be armed. Village secured, Grace reported after a few minutes. All life forms eliminated. No resistance. Remains. The Zeronians watched with what appeared to be approval. Now, Daniel said, let's run the same scenario using Earth's rules of engagement. Grace reset the simulation. Restricted warfare protocol. Objectives: eliminate enemy combatants, minimize civilian casualties, secure the area. This time, the Marines moved more carefully. They called out warnings before entering buildings. They clearly identified targets before firing. They established a safe corridor for civilian holograms to evacuate. They took prisoners when possible instead of shooting everyone. Village secured, Grace reported. 17 combatants neutralized, 5 captured. 0 civilian casualties. 42 civilians evacuated safely. The second approach took longer, one of the Zerionian officers noted. Yes, Daniel agreed, by about 4 minutes, but consider the long-term outcomes. He activated the room's main display, showing 2 different scenarios playing out over time. In the unrestricted approach, you destroyed the village and everyone in it, efficient in the moment, but what happens next? The simulation showed surrounding villages rising up in armed resistance. It showed increased recruitment for enemy forces. It showed a spreading conflict that required more and more troops to contain. Now look at the ethical approach outcomes. This simulation showed the evacuated civilians providing intelligence about enemy movements. It showed other villages cooperating with the Marines. It showed captured enemies revealing valuable information after humane treatment. In this case, following the rules of war actually shortened the overall conflict by weeks, saved resources, and resulted in better intelligence gathering, Daniel explained. Trell had been watching intently. Your simulation assumes the civilian population would turn against us if we eliminated a village. Why? Because people generally don't want to cooperate with those who kill their families and friends, Daniel said simply. They want revenge. We've observed this pattern in our conquered territories, Admiral Krelvac admitted reluctantly. Resistance often increases after we implement punitive measures against civilian populations. Daniel nodded. Exactly. Now let's try a different scenario. The next simulation showed a prisoner of war camp. In the first run-through, the prisoners were treated brutally, denied medical care, and some were executed. In the second, they were treated according to the Geneva Conventions. In the first scenario, not a single prisoner provided useful intelligence, despite torture, Daniel pointed out. In the second, several voluntarily offered information after being treated humanely. This contradicts our experience, Sub-Commander Xerix objected. Torture is highly effective. Actually, our most experienced intelligence officers disagree, Daniel replied. Torture victims will say anything to make the pain stop, including making up false information. This sends your forces on wild goose chases and wastes resources. He displayed data from Earth's military history showing the unreliability of intelligence gathered through torture compared to that obtained through building rapport with prisoners. Furthermore, Daniel continued, when your troops torture prisoners, enemy forces are less likely to surrender. They'll fight to the death instead, increasing your casualties. The Zeronians were silent, processing this information. But the most compelling reason is what happens after the war, Daniel said. Computer, show post-conflict scenarios. The display showed 2 different peace treaties. In the first, after unrestricted warfare, the treaty was signed under duress and broken within years, leading to renewed fighting. In the second, after ethical warfare, the treaty led to lasting peace and eventually alliance. The goal of warfare shouldn't just be to win the current fight. Daniel explained. It should be to establish lasting peace afterward. Ethical warfare makes that possible. Admiral Krelvak's expression was unreadable to human eyes, but his posture had changed subtly. Your approach is logical in ways I had not considered. The Zirionian Collective has fought 17 major campaigns in the last century. 12 of those systems still require significant military presence to maintain order. Because you never truly won the peace, Daniel suggested. Perhaps, the Admiral conceded. I wish to consult with my command. We will continue this discussion tomorrow. After the Zironians left, Captain Summers approached Daniel. That went better than I expected. They're starting to understand the practical benefits, at least, Daniel agreed. But I'm not sure if they're grasping the moral dimension at all. 1 step at a time, Sergeant, Lisa said. Remember, we're dealing with a species that has practiced unrestricted warfare for thousands of years. The fact that they're even considering alternatives is remarkable. Lieutenant Winters, who had remained behind, joined them. Did you see Trell's reaction when we showed the long-term outcomes? He was practically taking notes with all 4 eyes. Daniel nodded. He seems to be our best hope for getting through to them. The younger officers appear more open to new ideas. We've received a message from Earth Command, Lisa informed them. They're sending Professor Olivia Martinez to join us. She's the leading expert on interspecies ethics at the United Nations. That's good news, Daniel said. The more perspectives we can offer, the better. As they discussed next steps, Daniel couldn't help feeling that they were at a critical turning point. The Zironians were beginning to see the strategic advantages of ethical warfare, but would that be enough to change thousands of years of military doctrine? And more importantly, would it be enough to protect humanity if relations with the collective soured? He looked at the simulations still running on the main display, 2 possible futures branching out from different approaches to conflict. Everything might depend on which path the Zironians chose to follow. Professor Olivia Martinez arrived on the Intrepid the next morning. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Daniel met her in the shuttle bay. Staff Sergeant Jackson, she said, shaking his hand firmly. I've reviewed your presentations to the Zironians. Impressive work for someone without diplomatic training. Thank you, Professor, Daniel replied. But I'm not sure if I'm really getting through to them. Don't underestimate the power of practical demonstrations, Olivia said as they walked toward the conference room. These aliens are warriors at heart. They respect strength and efficiency. By showing them that ethical warfare can be more effective, you're speaking their language. When they entered the conference room, the Zirionian delegation was already waiting. Admiral Krelvak stood at the head of the table with Trell and the other officers. Professor Martinez, Captain Summers said, may I present Admiral Krelvak of the Zirionian Collective? Olivia nodded respectfully. Admiral, I appreciate your willingness to engage in this cultural exchange. Earth's history with warfare has been complex, but we've learned valuable lessons we're eager to share. The Admiral studied her with awe. 4 eyes. Your species continues to surprise us? You send warriors and scholars together. We are accustomed to keeping these roles separate. On Earth, the best warriors are also scholars of history and ethics, Olivia replied. And many scholars have experienced combat firsthand. Before the discussion could continue, an alarm blared throughout the ship. Captain Summers touched her communicator. Summers here. What's happening? The voice of her first officer came through clearly. Captain, we're receiving a distress signal from the Proxima trading station. They're under attack by what appears to be Praxis pirates. The Admiral's communication device made a similar alert. Sound. He listened to a report in the Zirionian language before turning to the humans. We have received the same distress call. The pirates are attacking both human and Zirionian interests at the trading station. Captain Summers straightened. Admiral, I propose a joint response. This could be an opportunity to put our discussions into practice, the Admiral considered for a moment. Agreed. We will coordinate our efforts. The dominant claw has superior weapons, but your vessel may have useful tactical capabilities. Within minutes, both ships were breaking orbit and preparing for light-speed jumps to the Proxima system. Daniel found himself summoned to the bridge along with Professor Martinez. "Sergeant, Professor," Captain Summers said, "I want you both present for tactical discussions with the Zeronians. This situation will test whether our cultural exchange has had any impact." When they arrived at the Proxima system 3 hours later, the situation became clear. The trading station, a massive structure that served as a neutral zone for commerce between various species, was under siege by 5 pirate vessels. Several sections of the station showed damage from weapons fire, the main viewscreen activated, showing Admiral Krelvac on the bridge of the Dominant Claw. "We have scanned the station," he reported. "There are approximately 300 pirates aboard. They have taken hostages from both our species and are using them as shields while they loot the station's resources. We need to coordinate a response that minimizes civilian casualties," Captain Summers replied. The Admiral's upper eyes narrowed. "The most efficient solution would be to destroy the entire station. The pirates and hostages would be eliminated, and the threat would end immediately." Daniel stepped forward. "Admiral, with respect, that would mean the deaths of over 2,000 civilians, including your own people. Acceptable losses to eliminate the pirate threat permanently," the Admiral stated. Professor Martinez joined the conversation. "Admiral, consider the long-term consequences. Destroying a neutral trading station with civilians aboard would violate interstellar commerce agreements and could lead to isolation of the Zerionian collective from trading partners." The Admiral paused. "This is an extension of your war crimes concept?" "Yes," Daniel confirmed. "Deliberately targeting civilians, even to eliminate an enemy, crosses a line that most spacefaring civilizations recognize." Trell, who stood behind the Admiral, spoke up. "There is also the matter of intelligence, Admiral. If we destroy the station, we lose any information about pirate bases and operations that we might otherwise obtain from prisoners." The Admiral considered this. "What alternative do you propose?" Captain Summers outlined a plan, a joint boarding operation. Small teams of both human Marines and Zerionian soldiers working together to clear the station section by section, rescuing hostages and capturing pirates when possible. "This will take considerably longer and put our forces at risk," the Admiral pointed out. "Yes," Daniel agreed. "But it will save innocent lives, preserve the station, and potentially yield valuable intelligence." The Admiral was silent for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "We will try your approach, humans. But if it fails, we revert to our methods." Within an hour, Daniel found himself leading a team of 6 Marines alongside Trell and 6 Zerionian soldiers. They were assigned to clear the station's medical section, where scans had detected a group of hostages. "Remember," Daniel told the mixed team as they prepared to breach a sealed door, "we identified targets before firing. Civilians are to be evacuated immediately. Any pirates who surrender are to be secured, not executed." Trell translated for his troops, though Daniel suspected from their expressions that not all of them approved of these restrictions. The operation began smoothly. The human Zerionian teams moved through the station with coordinated precision. Daniel's team successfully rescued 15 hostages from the medical bay with no civilian casualties, but as they moved deeper into the station, they encountered heavier resistance. Turning a corner, they found themselves under fire from a group of pirates using hostages as shields. "Hold fire," Daniel ordered as both humans and Zeronians took cover. "We cannot advance without risking the hostages," Trell observed. "And we can't retreat and leave them to die," Daniel replied. He studied the situation carefully, then outlined a plan. "If your soldiers can provide covering fire to keep the pirates pinned down, my team can flank them through the maintenance tunnels," Trell agreed, and they put the plan into action. The Zeronians laid down precise suppressing fire while Daniel led his Marines through narrow service tunnels to come up behind the pirates. The maneuver worked perfectly. Caught between 2 forces, most of the pirates surrendered immediately. 2 tried to fight and were stunned by non-lethal weapons. As Daniel's team secured the prisoners, one of the Zerionian soldiers raised his weapon to execute a pirate who had surrendered. Stop, Daniel ordered sharply. He surrendered. He's now a prisoner protected under the rules of warfare. The Zirionian hesitated, looking to Trell for guidance. Follow the human protocol, Trell commanded after a moment's pause. Secure the prisoner. As they continued through the station, similar scenes played out across other teams. The joint force gradually pushed back the pirates, section by section, rescuing hostages and taking prisoners rather than executing everyone they encountered. 6 hours into the operation, Admiral Krelvak's voice came through their communications devices. The pirate leader has offered to surrender all forces if we guarantee their lives will be spared, he announced. They were not expecting ... mercy. Captain Summers responded, We accept their surrender under standard protocols for treatment of prisoners, the Admiral paused before replying. We ... concur. It seems your methods have proven effective, Captain Summers. Perhaps there is wisdom in these restrictions after all. 2 days after the successful operation at Proxima Trading Station, Daniel sat in the Intrepid's observation lounge, watching as repair ships worked to fix the damage caused by the pirates. The joint human-Zirionian action had been a complete success. All hostages had been rescued, most of the pirates had been captured alive, and the station remained intact. Captain Summers entered the lounge and sat down across from him. You should be proud, Sergeant. Your lessons made a real difference. Out there, Daniel nodded. I still can't believe the Zironians actually followed the protocols, especially after centuries of unrestricted warfare. Sometimes the best way to teach is through example, Lisa replied. All the presentations in the world don't compare to seeing principles work in actual combat. Their conversation was interrupted. As Professor Martinez entered with Admiral Krelvak and Trell, May we join you? Olivia asked. Of course, Lisa said, gesturing to the empty seats. The Admiral settled his tall frame into a chair designed for humans, looking somewhat uncomfortable. We have been examining the results of our joint operation, he said without preamble. The outcome was ... unexpected. In what way, Admiral? Daniel asked. The pirate prisoners have provided extensive intelligence, Krelvak explained. We have identified 3 major pirate bases and their supply routes. This information alone will save us years of hunting them down. Trell added, They are cooperating because they were treated according to your protocols. This contradicts everything we believed about effective prisoner handling. And that's not all, the Admiral continued. The trading station administrators have expressed gratitude for our restraint. They have offered the Zirionian Collective preferential trading terms as a result. Daniel exchanged a glance with Captain Summers. This was exactly the kind of practical benefit that might convince the Zironians of the value of ethical warfare. Admiral, Professor Martinez said carefully, have you considered how these principles might apply to your other military operations? Krelvak's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Daniel had learned indicated deep thought. The High Command has been reviewing the data from this encounter. We have fought 12 insurgencies in conquered territories over the past 30 years. Despite our superior technology and unrestricted tactics, these conflicts continue, because you never win. The peace? Daniel suggested, echoing his earlier point. Perhaps, the Admiral admitted. Our traditional approach has been to crush resistance so completely that no one dares oppose us. But we find ourselves constantly deploying troops to maintain order. Whereas if you treated conquered populations with humanity, you might find them becoming willing participants in your collective rather than perpetual enemies. Olivia pointed out. Trell had been quiet, but now he spoke up. I have prepared a report for our military academy suggesting a new training program. If the Admiral approves, I would like Sergeant Jackson to help develop it. Daniel looked surprised. Me? You have demonstrated both combat effectiveness and ethical restraint, Trell explained. Our warriors would respect such a teacher, the Admiral nodded slowly. I have reviewed Trell's proposal. It has merit. The Zirionian Collective has conquered through superior force for millennia, but perhaps there are more efficient ways to expand our influence. Captain Summers leaned forward. Admiral, this could be the beginning of something important. A set of shared principles that govern warfare between our civilizations. A Galactic Geneva Convention, Professor Martinez suggested. We are not prepared to adopt all your restrictions, the Admiral cautioned. But we recognize there may be strategic advantages to some of them. It's a start, Daniel said. Their meeting was interrupted by a communication alert. Captain Summers activated the nearest screen to see her first officer's face. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Earth Command. The diplomatic team is ready to begin formal negotiations with the Zirionian Collective. Thank you, Commander. Tell them we'll be ready in 1 hour. After the communication ended, Admiral Krelvek stood. It seems our governments are eager to establish formal relations. Before we join them, Lisa said, I'd like to propose something. The incident at Proxima Station showed the value of cooperation between our forces. Would you consider a military exchange program? A few of your officers could serve temporarily aboard Earth vessels, and we could send some of ours to learn about Zirionian tactics. The Admiral considered this an interesting proposal. It would allow us to study each other's methods directly and build trust between our forces, Daniel added. I volunteer, Trell said immediately. The Admiral made the trilling sound that passed for Zirionian laughter. I expected nothing less, Sub-Commander. Your curiosity about human ways has been obvious. Then it's settled, Lisa said. We'll propose the exchange program during the diplomatic talks. As they prepared to leave for the formal negotiations, Admiral Krelvak gestured for Daniel to stay behind for a moment. Sergeant Jackson, he said when they were alone, when you first spoke of war crimes, I thought your species was weak. Now, I see there is strength in restraint, a different kind of strength than we are accustomed to, but strength nonetheless. Thank you, Admiral, Daniel replied. That means a lot coming from you. Do not misunderstand, the Admiral cautioned. We still believe in military power and expansion. But perhaps there are more efficient ways to maintain an empire than through fear alone. Daniel nodded. It's a beginning. As they walked together to join the others, Daniel reflected on how far they had come in just a few days. From the Zironians laughing at human concepts of warfare to considering adopting some of those same principles, it was more progress than he could have hoped for. The formal diplomatic meeting took place in the Intrepid's largest conference room. Representatives from Earth joined via holographic projection. Facing the Zirionian delegation across a long table, the Earth ambassador spoke first. We propose a treaty of friendship and cooperation between Earth and the Zirionian Collective, including protocols for peaceful resolution of disputes. Admiral Krelvak, serving as the Zirionian representative, responded, The Collective agrees in principle with one addition. We propose a joint committee to establish shared rules of warfare, building on the successful cooperation at Proxima Station. The Earth representatives looked surprised but pleased by this suggestion. As the negotiations continued, Captain Summers leaned close to Daniel. Did you ever imagine your lessons would lead to this? Daniel shook his head. Never. I was just trying to explain basic human decency to a species that found the concept alien. And now they're proposing to adopt some of those principles, Lisa said with a smile. Sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't destructive ones, but ideas. Later that evening, as the Intrepid prepared to return to Earth with the draft treaty, Daniel found Trell waiting outside his quarters. Sergeant Jackson, the young Zirionian said, I have been authorized to serve as the first exchange officer aboard this vessel. That's great news, Daniel replied. I look forward to working with you. Trell hesitated, then asked, Do you believe our species can truly change generations of military doctrine? Daniel considered this carefully. Change doesn't happen overnight. But it does happen. Just a week ago, your admiral was laughing at the idea of war crimes. Today he's proposing joint rules of warfare. Trell made a gesture that Daniel had learned was the Zirionian equivalent of a nod. Perhaps in time we will find a balance between strength and restraint. That's all any of us can hope for, Daniel said, offering his hand in the human gesture of friendship that Trell had now learned to return. As they shook hands, Daniel thought about how far they had come and how far they still had to go. But, for the first time since meeting the Zeronians, he felt genuine hope for the future. Sometimes the most powerful force wasn't superior weapons or technology, but simply the courage to stand for principles, even when faced with those who initially mocked them.